for this, and I know there's probably a lot of thought.
One thing that really went well about you was that I taken time out of an insane film.
Hey guys, on this episode of Unbeatable, I get a chance to connect with a guy who has been over my head for most of my career, and I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for Greg Coker and his Little Bird gunship that was over my head on more than one firefight in Iraq, Afghanistan, and in my career in the military. But by the way, in this episode, I'm going to tell you more than once what is the most deadly weapon on the battlefield, and you're going to laugh out loud. I promise you, you're going to laugh out loud when you hear what Greg and I both completely agree is the most deadly weapon on the battlefield. If you want to know what that is, you got to stay around for this episode of Unbeatable with my buddy, the Little Bird helicopter pilot, Greg Coker. Before we get into the interview, I want to remind you once again that this interview is brought to you by the Solomon Foundation. These guys have more than 7,000 investors, and they're helping the local church to grow. So when you partner with the Solomon Foundation, they're going to give you an excellent return while you make an eternal impact. And if you want to know more, go check these guys out at thesolomonfoundation.org. Now here's my interview with my buddy, Greg Coker.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.
Hey, Greg, it's good to see you in person after a bunch of phone calls and text messages back and forth with each other.
Yes, sir, it is, Jeff. Doggone, it's been a long time.
Yeah. How you doing today, brother?
If I was any better, I couldn't stand it. I am blessed.
You look good, man. You do. You look good. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me on this episode of the podcast.
It's an honor. Absolute honor for me, Jeff.
We're going to talk about the most dangerous weapon ever created on planet Earth. And I am going to tell everybody right up front what that weapon is. And then we're going to get to that weapon. And I want you to explain to everybody why the most dangerous weapon on planet Earth is a grease pencil.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You and I both know exactly what we're talking about. And everyone that's listening in the audience right now is saying, Jeff is making a joke right now. Jeff is trying to be funny by saying a grease pencil is there. It is right in front of you. Yeah. Jeff is making a joke. He's being funny about this grease pencil, but I am being absolutely serious. That is the most dangerous weapon on planet Earth.
It's the most high-tech, electronic
That's right.
system on the planet.
Of all of the extraordinary technology that the modern military has at their disposal all over the world, I'm still convinced that grease pencil that you had in your hand is the most dangerous thing on the battlefield. And we're going to tell everybody why in just a few minutes. The first time that I saw a Little Bird in action was very early in my career in the Ranger Regiment. And I was introduced, I came straight to the Army and straight to the Ranger Regiment. So I had the privilege of working with the 160th. And by the way, for most of our audience, they just heard a few weeks ago an incredible interview with Dan Gelada telling everybody how the Top Gun helicopter pilots on the planet are all in the same unit. They are all in the Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
Yes.
But why don't you tell everybody about this aircraft that you and I call the Little Bird, what in military nomenclature is the AH-6 or the MH-6. Would you describe what this aircraft is and a little bit about what this aircraft was designed to do for the military?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. It's a civilian helicopter, and I think it's Boeing McDonnell Douglas. It was the aircraft was designed by Mr. Hughes back in 1956, and it's a very interesting story. And he was very concerned about survivability in a crash. So if you look at this little helicopter and you look at the main body, well, it looks like an egg almost. And he designed it that way. for crash survivability. So move forward, the United States Army, and it was designated MD 500, Hughes McDonnell Douglas 500. So saw a bunch of action, many years in Vietnam and then it's also known as the Loach. So talking to the Vietnam
I
guys.
didn't know that. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
learning something today.
But the official Army designation, as we name all of our helicopters after Indian tribes, was the Cayuse. So that was the official name, since we have Black Hawk, we have Apache, so on and so forth. And then as it progressed over the years, and being such a great helicopter, I mean, even back then they had miniguns on it. They had, in the 60s and 70s. So it was
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, sir. It was a workhorse even back then. And goodness gracious, I've talked to so many Vietnam vets that flew that helicopter, and like me, and everybody that flies that machine or rides on that machine, they love that helicopter. Absolutely. It's saved many lives. So as it progressed throughout the years, they kept it, and now it's an MD 530. So it's just advanced engine, advanced main rotor, advanced tail rotor, and the civilian designation for it is AH6I. And now in the 160th, we're up to the M model. I flew J heavy, J lights, and then the Mike model was coming on just as I was getting ready to leave and retire.
Yeah, and for everyone that's listening, every time that there's a major update, you add a different letter to the end of that so that people know you're flying a little bit different update than the helicopter a few years ago.
Yes. Yeah, so the OH6 became, when the 160th brought in the Little Bird, which is in 1981, after the failed attempt of the hostage rescue in Iran in 1981. And Colonel Beckwith wanted an all-Army aviation unit to support his Delta force back then. And so that's how the birth of the 160th came. It was Black Hawks and it was AH-6s were the original gunbirds. Yeah.
Yeah. And just a couple of episodes ago, Dan and I were talking about operation. Actually, I was talking just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago with General Jerry Boykin, who was on Operation Eagle Claw, the attempt to rescue those American hostages from the embassy in Tehran, and how that thing became a giant ball of flames in the middle of that Desert One runway strip.
Yes.
Which eventually led to the greatest helicopter pilots on the planet. I said this 15 times when I was talking to Dan, and I meant it every single time I said it. Yeah. These are, hands down, there isn't even a close second, the greatest helicopter pilots on the planet. There isn't a close second.
We don't know what we're doing, brother. We just do it. So
you do it to a T. You put those helicopters in places where I'm looking at it saying there's absolutely no way this is going to fit. We're all going to crash. And sure enough, you thread the needle with those rotor blades on those helicopters. I've seen it countless times.
Yes, you have.
How did you end up in the seat flying helicopters? Because nobody really starts their career as a warrant officer. Nobody starts their career flying helicopters in the 160th. How did you get there?
Well, I was a child of the 60s and the 70s. So the Vietnam War, I mean, that was always on one of our, 2 or 3 channels back then. And I was, the helicopter, as a kid sitting there watching that, I was just overwhelmed by this crazy whirlybird, thing could land right there and take off.
Yeah.
Unlike a fixed-wing airplane, and it could carry weapon systems. And then as I got older, my dad was in the Air Force. And
I didn't know that. All right. What did he do?
He retired as a command master chief, so he was an E9.
Wow.
He worked, yes, sir. He did 30 years, and worked several jobs in the
Yeah.
Air Force. So started out as a missile man back in.
I was going to say, not many people make it to that level in the Air Force.
No, less than 1%, less than 1%.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just, I really loved the aircraft and the Hueys and the Cobras and the Loaches.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I kept looking at the Army as a, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do when I was a young man, like most of us. And, and Dad was like, hey, and I wanted to fly, but I didn't have a degree.
Uh-huh.
So the Army was my vehicle for doing that. And I enlisted in the Army, went to the 101st, 327th Infantry, 1st Brigade.
Great unit.
Yes, and my first brigade commander, my first boss there was Colonel Ralph Hagler. And he was.
Yes, of course. That old 2nd Ranger Battalion Ranger. Heck yeah.
He was 275 commander when they jumped into Grenada. So
I
always had him in my ear and in my head. And he fully supported, he's like, no, you need to go be a Ranger. And I said, I will, sir, but I'm going to go to flight school too. I want to fly helicopters. I want to fly gunships and blow stuff up. And he was like, okay, that's what we're going to do then. So applied for flight school in early 89. And it was a process back then because that was before computers and internet. Yeah. And it would take you several months you had to hand walk all your paperwork and get that stuff done and signed and flight physicals and fast tests and all those type things. So yeah, somehow magically I was selected to attend flight school in March of 89. And yeah, so that's when I started. I asked to fly guns, and everybody thought I was crazy because, the Black Hawk was new. And
Black Hawk was new, and everybody wanted to get on that new aircraft. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And I said, no, I want to fly that Cobra, man. That thing's pretty cool. So I tracked Cobras, and then my first tour was in Korea in the 517th Air Cav up north. And yeah, what a great tour and a great opportunity for a young W1 to get that experience with those guys. Yes, sir.
So for the audience, there's two kinds of helicopter pilots in the United States Army. There are commissioned officers that are kind of leaders of helicopter pilots and helicopter units. They fly regularly, but the job of a warrant officer is to pretty much fly that helicopter, and that's your full-time job. And a warrant officer is kind of halfway between enlisted and commissioned officer. You're a specialist in one thing, and nobody can do that thing better than you. All warrant officers, this is true of. But when it comes to flying with the 160th, this is what separates you. And I'll say it with you a dozen times. These really are the greatest helicopter pilots on the planet. So when do you decide you want to go try out for the Night Stalkers?
Well, I had seen when I was enlisted, I'd seen the little black helicopters flying around posts. And I'd be like, who are those guys? And, big sergeant.
Those guys are pretty cool. Who are those guys?
Yeah. There's a big sergeant look at it and says, shut up, Coker, clean your weapons, They're not there. Don't look at them. And of course, my dad, he knew about them. But I've always been very driven in anything that I've done my whole life. And I wanted to go be with the best. So, so in 93, I went back to Campbell. I flew Apaches for a short time there at first in the 101st for a couple of years. And I was like, and I had a couple buddies that were in B Company in the 160th. They flew AHs, Jerry Harp and Mark Jones, all Mogadishu guys, actually. So Randy Jones. And, so I, everybody's like, hey, put your assessment paperwork in. But there's a standard. I don't know what it is nowadays, but they wanted you to have 1,000 hours of flight time and then 100 hours of night vision
flying with nods, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, I only had like 620 hours of flight time, but I had 240 hours of night vision goggles.
Wow,
time.
flying under goggles for 240 hours.
W1.
Yeah.
So
people are like, this guy's a freak.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So And my buddies that were in the unit, they're like, hey man, just go ahead and put your stuff in and let them take a look at it. So personally, I felt that they took a chance on Greg Coker, and because I didn't meet that flight time standard, but I had the night vision, and I know they took that into consideration, and they accepted me to come assess. So I went in 93 and assessed and was successful by some odd reason, grace of God, they're like, welcome aboard. And I never will forget though, at my board. So the final day you go into a board, and the commander last question was, well, Mr. Coker, he said, what would you like to fly? And I looked at him standing at attention, and I said, sir, I'll fly kites out of hot air balloons if that's what you want me to do.
Yes.
And they all wanted to laugh,
They
but
said, that's the right answer. You just chose the right answer.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I started Green Platoon.
We talked about it, Dan and I did just a couple of episodes ago about Green Platoon. But for the listeners that missed that one, why don't you give them the short version of what Green Platoon is and what it puts a pilot through?
Sure. So there's an enlisted Green Platoon, and then there's a warrant officer Green Platoon. And when we start, it's 3 to 4 weeks. So we do CQB, we do close quarter battle training, firearms training. We do hand-to-hand combat, knife fighting, of course, working with our pistols, working with our M4s, and we do some ground navigation type stuff. And then the pilots, we go on to our flight phase. Yeah. So for the AHs, it's about 8-9 months. I think then ours was the longest period. Like the Hawk guys would be 4, 5, 6 months. Chinook guys 4, 5 night. But we have to learn to shoot, so that adds time. To that training. So you go when you start. You learn to navigate on a map, a compass, and a clock to hit that target plus or minus 30 seconds.
30 seconds. That's right.
That's the standard. And you might fly 2-3 hours, and you must hit that TOT, that time on target, plus or minus 30 seconds. And if you don't meet that standard, then they, tell you to go somewhere else and never come back, or, hey, go get some more training and then, come back. And so they look at the whole man at the unit. So that's the next. And we do all the environments, we do desert, we do over water, we do mountains, shoot. It takes about 18, anywhere from 18 to 24 months to teach a guy to shoot to the standards that we're held to in that helicopter. And it's using, grease pencil.
All right. So before we get to the grease pencil, I want people to hear this process. Frankly, the overwhelming majority of helicopter pilots in the military will never get the hours that they need to even try or to even put the packet in. They won't make it through the physical challenges of Green Platoon, but then the process of becoming the kind of pilot that the 160th needs is brutal. So the percentage of total pilots in the Army, how many of them, entire U.S. Army, actually make it into the unit, pass Green Platoon, become, no kidding pilots? And I'm talking all airframes in the 160th. Wow.
That's a good question. Jeff, not very many.
Yeah. I'm going to say
less than 10%.
Well, I'm going to tell you, not even 10% will qualify, will have the hours to try out. Less than half of that will even get the, invite. And then many of them will not make it through Green Platoon. So now you're talking, frankly, the numbers are classified, but just a handful of pilots in the United States Army at any one time serving in that unit.
And just an example, in my Green Platoon, there were 4 of us. I was the only one that finished.
Yeah, that's what I wanted people to hear in this audience. Like, this is no joke. And the 4 that were with you, or the 4 that were in Green Platoon, all the rest of them were amazing pilots.
Yes,
just
absolutely
not that good.
Yeah, a couple of them even they came back and were successful.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Hey, just for everybody who's watching this on YouTube, I did this for you today. Look at what I'm wearing on my shirt. You have to kind of zoom in and look closely. I've got the Night Stalker logo on my shirt, but of course, it's black on black for a reason, because this is my Little Bird shirt.
Ah,
This is my 6-gun shirt. And
gotcha.
because it's my 6-gun shirt, it's black on black. So you'd have to freeze the camera and zoom in on YouTube to be able to see the logo. But I've said this throughout my career. I would not be alive today. I've been on many, many battlefields, and I've always had the privilege of being around America's greatest warriors, some of the greatest warriors in the coalition and allies that we have. But I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for those other warriors on my left and right. I wouldn't be alive today. I've said this to more than a few pilots. If it wasn't for the Spectre gunships that were over my head, and I would not be alive today if it wasn't for the Little Birds. I don't think most people understand just how close to the fight, just how deadly that gunship is. But I said this to Dan a couple episodes ago. I'm going to say it to you. I am convinced that grease pencil carried the fight in Somalia, and not just Somalia, in Panama, in Kuwait, well, not Desert Storm, but in Iraq, in Afghanistan.
Grenada.
So now let's tell everybody about the grease pencil. What makes the grease pencil so deadly? Because we've talked about it a bunch and people are still saying, I'm not sure I believe these two guys. I think they're making this up.
No.
Tell everybody about the grease pencil. Tell them what it is and what makes it so deadly.
Yes, sir. And I've had some of the world's greatest shooters at Fort Campbell or at Fort Bragg, and they would ask, they're like, man, you guys are really accurate with that helicopter. What kind of sighting system do you use? So, we'll walk over to of course, the operators and rangers, they all know.
They all know what's going on, right? Yeah.
This is going to be funny. And so, we all wear a grease pencil on our kit, right here.
Right there in front of you so that you can easily pull it out. Yep.
And they're like, what? And I said, come on, I'll show you. We walk over to the helicopter, and every guy's got a different style or, what fits him. And I said, yeah, look at that windscreen right there. And they're like, oh my gosh, you use a grease pencil mark
That's
on
right.
the windscreen?
Big plexiglass windscreen on the front of that helicopter, and there is a little X or a crosshairs somewhere on that windscreen that's put on there by a grease pencil. But tell the listener what that X or crosshair represents.
So that's our sight for shooting the miniguns, the rockets, the Gal 19, and we're held to very high standards to shoot very accurately, very close to our friendlies. And for me, I could put a rocket through a front door at 500 meters at night, and I could do it all
night
day,
vision goggles on. That's what I'm saying. With night vision goggles, yeah.
Using that grease pencil mark. Of course, it gets a little bigger at night because they're a little bitty during the day, but then at night, mine was probably about, I don't know, maybe 3/4 inch diameter. But yeah, that's what we use, and that's it. That's why it takes so long to teach a new 6-gun to shoot. It takes literally 18 to 24 months to teach, and we're at the range at least 3 days a week, and then gun smokes and all the training that we do with our customers, and I still say customers, but
so do I. I think that's the right term. Yeah,
I still say red and brown, but it's just, it was beat into us. So that is our sighting system, and you have to, like, I'm left eye dominant, so it depends on the guy's eye dominance, and is the guy a shooter? So over my tenure there in the company, 15 years, I'd ask a guy, hey, do you shoot competitively, or are you just, and I could tell when they'd start shooting, but because as an IP and instructor, you want to help them be successful as quickly and as efficiently as possible, so we could move them on to the next stage or next phase. So it's millions and millions of rounds and thousands of rockets, man, to get.
He is not exaggerating when he says millions and millions of bullets, because if you understand the rate of fire of those miniguns, and you have two miniguns or two
Yep.
Gal 19s on that thing, describe the rate of fire for one of those miniguns.
4,000 rounds per minute, 62
Yeah.
bullets per second.
That's what I want people to hear. 4,000 rounds a minute may not make any sense to you, but there are 6 barrels. That's why we're talking about the 6 guns right now. And
Yes.
those 6 barrels are firing more than 60 rounds per second. Like that. There was more than 60 rounds that just went towards the target.
Yes,
And
sir.
Greg, I have had little birds come in on gun runs, no exaggeration, putting bullets 50 meters in front of my face. And
Yes, sir.
never once was I worried about whether or not one of those bullets was going to hit me, because I trusted the little bird pilots that much.
You bet. Yes, sir. And that's why we train the way we train for years and years, even before Moog. And, the ground guys have full faith and confidence in our abilities, that we will shoot as close to them as we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, at Haditha Dam, I shot 12 meters in front of Rangers, brother. 12 meters. So, but they trusted us,
Yeah.
and we trust them to make the right calls. And,
Sure.
I told Mo, I said, this is going to be danger close, brother. He's like, Roger that.
It's going to be really, really close. So put your head down.
Yeah, but 12 meters, not very far. It's like,
listen, with all of the amazing technology in the military today, and I'm not just talking to U.S. military, surely there's some computer generated sites that can put rounds where you want them. But to this day, I have never seen any weapon system more accurate than a little bird and a grease pencil on the windscreen. And the first time I ever saw it was in the invasion of Panama, Just Cause, right before we were getting ready to launch that night.
Wow.
I was staging out of the hangar at Howard Air Force Base, where all of the 160th was.
Mm-hmm.
And the 160th was getting ready to fly out to hit the target and go get Kurt Muse.
Yeah.
I was providing the theater level search and rescue force, and that first little bird went down with Kurt Muse on it, and I had to
MH6.
That's right, MH. And when it came back, it looked like you could fit that entire airframe in the back of a pickup truck. No exaggeration.
Yes, sir.
That's what kind of a balled up mess it was. I still remember seeing the suspension lines in the rotors, because it was flying so low that it picked up a parachute off of the ground, spun it up into the rotors, and that's what caused it to go down.
Yes, sir.
But I want the listeners to understand what you did with that airframe. What makes your airframe so deadly is how close you are to the fight.
Yes.
Let's be honest. You get lots and lots of amazing aircraft in the military that are up at different levels in the air. But most of what the little bird does is 100 meters over my head.
Yes. We're in the close fight.
100 meters.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That's why you guys can put rounds 50 meters off of the nose of the customers that you're supporting, because you're that close to the fight.
Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. And it's a highly maneuverable aircraft too. It's,
man. Holy smokes.
You're like, okay, you've flown Cobras and a Pad. Great helicopters. But, the Little Bird or the MD or the AH-6, it's the Lamborghini of helicopters. I mean, man, we can get that thing around so fast. They call it, you guys always call it, gosh, did you see the AHs in the fur ball? We're shooting and turning and shooting and upside down and coming back around. And,
he is not making any of this stuff up. Yep.
No, sir.
Greg, you did a lot of combat in the 160th in that greatest helicopter platform, most deadly weapon system in the military.
Yes.
But why don't you tell everybody about March 19th, 2004? Tell everybody what you were doing when you got shot down in Iraq.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we were operating. The insurgency had, it was in full blown going, and So we were operating mostly between Fallujah and Ramadi.
Which
and
is
then
the
there-
Sunni Triangle, and that's the epicenter of violence in Iraq in 04.
It was the
Just
wild,
for the listener.
wild west.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And then there's another small town south of Fallujah, Amaria. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's about 17 miles. So that formed a triangle. If you looked on the map, Fallujah, Ramadi down to Amaria, and we called it the Devil's Triangle because it was like every terrorist in the world was there. Fallujah, Ramadi down to Amaria, and we had been hitting targets constantly every night, 6, 7, 8 targets a night, depending on if it was wintertime or summertime. Wintertime, we have longer periods of darkness, so we can hit more targets than we can in the summertime because we have a shorter period of darkness.
And for the listener, Night Stalkers and the customers on the back only hit targets at night. That's why you need long periods of darkness.
Well, in theory.
Yeah.
So,
well, try to only hit targets at night. Let me put it that way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, we are night stalkers, not day stalkers. So keep that in mind.
Right.
But so we'd hit it. I think it was like our last target that night, early morning, probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on the 19th. And from that target, we got intel that there was another Al Qaeda high value target that we were looking for, and they were going to meet at a house at 10 o'clock in the morning in Fallujah that morning. So we were like, oh, Lord, not a daytime hit.
Yeah, nobody wants to hit a target during daylight hours.
Oh, no,
nobody.
Sir. You have, and you know what it was like. So, and Sergeant Major, he was like, hey, we just want you guys. We had a little area just east of Fallujah where we could go land, hang out. The Rangers had secured it, and then the customers, and then we could kind of get a plan and refuel or rearm, whatever we need to do there. And just for the listeners, so that's called a FARP. So the 160th will put in a FARP. That's Forward Arming Refueling Point. And our enlisted guys, our crew chiefs, each helicopter has a crew chief, and we call them armament dogs, but armament personnel. So there's always 2 AHs flying together. They fly single ship. So those 2 crew chiefs, 2 armament dogs will set up 2 pads for the 2 AHs, have fuel, bullets, and rockets sitting there waiting for us to reload.
And by the way, mad respect for the FARP teams in the 160th, because you just go out into the middle of bad guy territory with a giant bladder of jet fuel and a whole bunch of rockets and wait for a helicopter to show up, hoping to God that you don't get attacked by the enemy, because it's not going to be good for you if you do.
No, sir. No, sir.
Mad respect for the FARP teams in the 160th. Yes.
Absolutely. And when you watch those guys work in the FARP, they look like a NASCAR pit crew.
They do.
Man.
Yep. Seen it many times. Totally do.
I could land, get refuel, rearm 3 minutes and be back in the fight. That's just incredible.
That's insane. Incredible. Yep.
Yeah. So Sergeant Major said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to hang out here until hit time, which was 10 o'clock. And he said, you guys crank up, go to 100%. And that way, if they needed us, we could respond with it.
Yeah. You're gone in an instant.
Yes. So they hit the target. They got the high value target off at it. So they brought them back and had a little chat with him. And
I like how you put that. Yes.
His boss was down in Amaria, and we were looking for him. So Sergeant Major says, okay, here's what we're going to do. He says, I'm going to take my recce team, my reconnaissance team. It was 3 gun trucks and 2 armored vehicles. He says, we're just going to drive down there. We're going to kill that guy. And I want you guys to go back to BIOP. We were still living at Saddam International Airport on the west side in the hangars there. And he says, you guys, we'd all been up for days and days.
Yeah.
Targets, planning, hitting, the deal. But just for the audience, it's nonstop. We'd catch a combat nap now and then and get some chow or maybe go do some PT. But, we're always focused on the mission and time-sensitive targets. So they were all time sensitive targets. Guy'd show up, be there a few minutes, so we had to go and hit it. So we fly back to BIOP, Baghdad International Airport, and shut down, recock everything, check the aircraft, just getting ready for the next, we call them pods, period of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So that next night. And it was probably it was a little after 12, and one of the guys came running up and says, "Hey, the recce team just called in a tick. So troops in contact.
Yep.
They're in trouble." So in another unspoken rule is that we will come get you if you get in trouble. There's no
break almost every rule. That's right. Break almost every rule to get to you.
We will break every rule to come get you. We will. It's unspoken, but everybody knows that will happen. So we were like, let's saddle up and go, boys. Roger that. It was probably about 12:30 in the afternoon. I mean, daytime. And here we are in our two little black helicopters about, I don't know, a foot off of the trees or a foot off of the deck, hauling behind to get to them because we had no situational awareness. What was going on. We just heard, okay, they're in a tick or they got ambushed. So we get on, and it was like a, I don't know, 10 or 11 minute flight, but I was dash 2 that day. So there's a lead AH and then a trail AH. And I had a brand new 6-gun with me, first combat tour. But it was, and I need to set the conditions. At the time, there were only 22 of us on the planet.
Yeah.
Flew AH-6s. So unlike a Ranger battalion, well, you have 3 battalions. So B Company, we only have about 14, 15 pilots that are FMQ, fully mission qualified pilots that can conduct combat operations by the book. Well, we got short, guys got hurt or whatever the case. Yeah. So, and my co-pilot was a BMQ. He was a basic mission qualified pilot. And I told the commander, I says, no, he's good to go. All he's got to do is sit there and arm me, and have his M4 up. But our standard operating procedure in BCO, if you're not on the controls, then you've got your M4 up and ready to suppress,
shoot,
point target out the door. So I told him, I says, all right, man. As soon as I cranked the helicopter, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And I was like, hey, we're going into some really, really bad area. I want you to, if you see anything that moves, I want you to engage it, okay? If they have weapons or meet the ROE at the time, rules of engagement. Yeah. And he was like, roger that. So we take off, we get on station, we engage a couple targets. There was one group that appeared they were trying to get down in the river and flank the vehicles of the ground force. So so then they got reconsolidated. They had all their vehicles lined up on the road, and they got the guy, and the troop commander calls and says, hey, we're almost ready to exfil. And it was like, oh, okay.
Breathe a sigh of relief when you hear exfil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was intense, man. It was just, and all I could think about was Black Hawk Down. That's all I could think about. Here's 2 black helicopters. It's daytime, and we just got done stirring the hornet's nest.
Yeah, you did.
So we did a couple more recce's, reconnaissance in the air, just to make sure nobody was trying to get to the ground force and their vehicles. And I always do a low pass, over the vehicles, and always wave to the fellas. Okay, thumbs up. We're getting out of here, and kind of a non-comm, no comm.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go. So I did that. I swooped down over the top of one of the gun trucks and waved at them, and they waved back, and I was in a climbing right-hand turn I was about 165 feet. I had a 20 knot tailwind, which helicopters and airplanes, we need headwinds. We need wind to
Yeah.
help us with the aerodynamics of the aircraft. And this, all I remember is this giant explosion. And I'd been in mortar attacks and rocket attacks and all kind of crazy stuff. And I mean, it just shook the helicopter. And then this white ball went right by my head. And because I was kind of looking that way as I was in the turn, aircraft shuttered, and then we get caution warning tones in our headset that the engine's out, or different things. And I was just like, I wish I could turn this thing off, but I can't. So it got a little quiet in the helicopter because they fired it's a man portable heat seeking missile. It was an SA-16 when they did forensics and found they wanted to confirm or deny the system. So yeah, dude was on, and two of the operators, they saw the shot from the building. It was a 2-story building. So they started immediate suppression on the building, saw the missile hit my helicopter, and I started an auto rotation. So that's a maneuver in helicopters that you're taught if the engine quits. So you lower the collective to keep the rotor system turning at, at 90 to 100% RPM. And it's nothing more than a powered off landing, an auto rotation. But keep in mind, I was in the worst conditions to conduct an auto rotation at that time. I had a tailwind. I was heavy. I was full of gas. I'd only made a couple engagements. We hadn't been there that long. So I entered the auto. And at that point, at that moment in time, the best way I can explain it is like old 35 millimeter movie reel. It was frame by frame by frame by frame.
Funny how time slows down at that moment.
Adrenaline. We got some great stuff in our bodies, brother. You know it. And isn't adrenaline the greatest drug on
It's incredible. Yep.
So I went to work, and I was an instructor pilot too. I'd done lots and lots of auto rotations, but none for real. And and my co-pilot said, he was looking right too as we're in that steep turn. And he said this about 1 meter long, this white hot rod went right by my head. And I actually got missile fragments in the side of the face and the neck as it went by us. So got the aircraft level, entered an auto rotation. I didn't have time to get on the radio, put out Mayday call. It was only about three seconds and change from the time I entered to the time I touched down.
Yeah, because of how low, that's the thing I was trying to stress, because of how low to the ground you are, which makes you incredibly deadly on the battlefield. But it also means if you get hit, there's going to be about a split second between getting hit and hitting the ground.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. So I got, in helicopter pilots, we use things around us like trees or houses or a building or to judge our height above the ground, because there's things that we have to do in the helicopter. So at 75 feet, you start a deceleration to bleed that airspeed off. All right. And then you hold that to about 25 feet. And then you're going to pull what we call as an initial, all right, with our collective, and that puts pitch in those blades, and it kind of slows us down even more. And then we level the helicopter at that point because we want to touch down level, not in a deceleration mode. And I didn't know the condition of the ground. So I in my mind, I wanted a really hard decel to bleed off all the airspeed that I could to minimize my ground run. Because we don't have brakes or anything, you can't put your foot out and stop like Fred Flintstone.
Yeah.
So, and I had a radar altimeter. So I was cross-checking my rotor, my radar altimeter, and making sure I was hitting all these things. And again, this happened in just a few seconds. But, the human mind, it's the fastest computer on the planet, always will be. And so in my mind, again, I says, all right, I'm going to hold a little high level, and then I'm just going to pull everything I've got left in that rotor system. So what that does, it maximizes the pitch in those blades, and it just cushions your landing, and then you touch down. And we touched down, and the other AH said he had come back around and watched it, and they, he told me, he's like, man, that was the best auto rotation I've ever seen.
If you're going to do it, that's the way to do it.
I said, it's like Neil Armstrong, man, landing the limb. He only had one shot.
That's right.
He did it. So we touched down, and it's just, the terrain over there is just powder. It's like, it's not sand, it's dirt. And
I called it moon dust over in Afghanistan. Yes. It was like moon dust.
It was, man. Oh, that was another terrible place. But anyway, so we touched down, and I'm thinking to myself, when we start to slide, and I'm like, okay, man, we got this. We're on the ground. It's all good. And we slid. And again, dust just engulfs the cockpit. I couldn't see anything. I was just hanging on to the controls, making sure my pedals were right, making sure the collective was all the way down. And then the cyclic is centered. And I remember what happened was we went down, we slid about 35 meters, not far. We went down a bit of a slope, and at the bottom of that slope was soft dirt. And those skids hit that soft dirt on a slope and stuck in that soft dirt, and it flipped us end over end 3 times. I remember hearing the rotor blades hitting the ground, and I was just like, doggone, man, I had this thing. I had it. Now I'm angry because I'm going to lose a helicopter. And because, we were sliding, and your mind goes in nanoseconds.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm not kidding, man, it was frame by frame by frame. Everything I did in those 3.5 seconds. And then it was dark. I think I was knocked out, probably. Never told the docs that, because if an aviator is knocked unconscious, you're grounded for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And our docs, they trust us. We're all professionals. They're like, hey, are you good to go? Roger that, sir. I'm good to go. Okay, I'll give you an up slip. Or no, sir, I'm not good. And it's just that it's just that communication and trust between our flight surgeons and even the ranger docs. They'd watch over us when we were out at Dig the Dam. We had the ranger doc with us, and they looked after us. But so I came to, and when like a parachute jump, not PLF's not too good, or the wind catches you and drags you, and so we go through those checks.
You're just checking yourself out to say, am I all right? Do I still have all my arms and legs?
Yes, I'm conscious, and we came to rest upside down, so we were inverted, kind of hanging in the helicopter. And I remember hearing this popping noise, and the first thing that came to my mind was popcorn. It was crazy. I'm like, man, that's weird.
Dan talked about the popcorn a lot in that episode. Yep.
Yes, he did. I watched it. Dan and I are good friends. But anyway, and I was like,
but for the people that missed that episode, what is the popcorn that you were listening to?
That was ammo cooking off right behind my head. Probably about, I don't know, 1,500 rounds worth in both ammo cans, because you got a can for each gun. Okay. And it sits right behind the pilot in the cargo area. So I was like, oh man, that's not good.
That's not good. Yep.
No. And then I thought about, because I had 17-pound HE rockets on board. So then I was thinking, oh goodness, what are those things going to do?
Yeah. Right.
And they didn't do anything. They didn't go off. They didn't explode. Nothing. So thank goodness. So my first priority was, okay, we got to get out of this helicopter. This thing's on fire. And then secure the area around us. Now I'm thinking, I'm not kidding. First thought was Black Hawk down. Little black helicopter shot down. We're 300 meters from the bad guys. I can hear the ground force and the other AAH. They're suppressing targets. They're engaging targets. And I said, okay, we're going to be okay. So I looked over at my co-pilot. He had blood all over his face. And I was like, oh man, did he get hit? And the little bird is bad about in a crash sequence, the shoulder harness not locking for some odd reason. And I know a couple guys that happened to. What happens is they hit the cyclic and that knocks all their teeth out in the crash sequence. So that was one of my thoughts is, okay, maybe he hit the cyclic. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, hey, are you okay? And he kind of nodded his head. And I said, all right. I said, get your rifle, because we carry our rifles right there within reach of us. And I said, get your rifle. And I point, because in a gun bird, you don't want to get to the front of it in case, a bullet launches or a rocket accidentally launches. So it's just a safety factor. And I point with my arm, and I really didn't realize that we were upside down at that time either. But I pointed and I said, meet me over here. Okay. And he kind of nodded his head. He never looked at me. He was still looking straight ahead. So I pull my belt and my latch. I grab my rifle and I crawl out the front because I wanted to prioritize again and make sure nobody was trying to come up on the helicopter. And so I stood up, I took a step and I fell down. And I stood up and I took a step and this happened 2 or 3 times. And I was like, oh, heck, man, my leg's broken, But what happened is I got a stinger, what they call a stinger in your lower spine. Yeah. Pinched a nerve, and my right leg had kind of went to sleep, but it came back. But I sat down, I pulled my pants leg up, checked my legs, checked my ankles, my feet, everything was intact. And took my helmet off, checked my rifle, make sure everything was good with it, checked my pistol, and then I got up and I did 360 degrees around the aircraft, to make sure we were safe. And so I looked back and I thought about, okay, well, I'm going to get we carry those little rucksacks right behind our seats there. And I was like, dang, man, I need that rucksack because there's water in there. There's night vision goggles, ammo, grenades. Then I turn around and look, and the cargo area is fully engulfed in fire. That's why the ammo was cooking off.
Yeah.
Popcorn. So I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. That's out of the question. So I look, my co-pilot's not out. So I go to the front of the helicopter and I was like, hey, I said, you got to get out right now. It's on fire. I mean, it's burning quickly. He kind of nodded his head. So I get back out. I just kind of take a knee. I'm looking towards the east, so towards the Ville where the shot came from.
Towards the bad guys, yeah.
Yes, towards the bad guys. And then, and I don't know how much time went by, Jeff. I have no idea. I really don't. And so I look back again because I was expecting, him to come up. He's still in the helicopter. And now the fire is almost engulfed the cockpit from my angle. So I kind of shuffle over there. I lay my rifle down. I get on my belly. I crawl in there. I reach up and he's just looking at me. And I reach up and I grab his latch, and I keep in mind he's upside down. I just pull the latch. Well, he falls, head first, going, hits the ground, and I just grab him. I grab him by his straps on his kit, and I just start pulling him. And I pull him, and I pull him. But when I reached up to pull his belt latch, the fire was, licking at his arm. And I was like, okay, man, he's got to get out.
Right.
And so we get out and kind of get over. There was a little spot that I found about 50 meters away. There's a little defilade. And I was like, this is a good place. We can get here. We can defend if we have to. And I put him in a prone facing to the north. I got on a knee facing to the east. And I said, hey, if you hear something or see something, give me a squeeze or, sound off something. Let's put both eyes on it. Let's put both guns on it. Let's talk about it. We're a little jacked up right now. We both had head injuries. I think we've been knocked unconscious for a few seconds, but, came to, and, and he kind of nodded his head. And then I checked him the best I could. We got his helmet off. I thought, okay, he doesn't have a neck injury, or his helmet looks okay. My helmet had been cracked in the crash sequence. I'd hit the door frame in one of the tumbles. And so he kind of nodded again. And again, I don't know how much time went by. The other AH came over, and we kind of waved, just gave a thumbs up to each other. And then he had to depart. He was almost out of gas, so he had to leave. And then I heard a vehicle, and I said, "Hey, I've got a vehicle coming up." So he kind of scooted over, and I heard it stop. And then I saw a cap, kind of bobbing. He was running.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of, got up on my both knees to look over this little defilade, and then I saw a face, and then a beard, and then Kit, and I was like, "Oh, I know him." All right, that's Chaz. He's coming to get us.
Yeah.
And he stopped, and he looked at us, and then he took off running again. And later, a couple months later, I saw him in the chow hall one day, and I said, "Hey," I said, "why did you stop when you were running up to us?" He goes, "Gravy." He said, "I was like, how did those Rangers get here so fast?" he thought it was two Rangers, guarding the aircraft. And then he was like, "Oh no, that's Gravy and his co-pilot." So we get back off. We stand up, and he hugs us, and we're looking back at the helicopter. He told me later too. He said, I asked him for a fire extinguisher so I could put the fire out.
Yeah.
He goes,
"Good luck with that. A fire extinguisher ain't gonna put that out."
No, sir. But yeah, that little helicopter was fully engulfed in fire by now. And ammo was cooking off, and everything was burning, and the fuel was burning. And so he looked at me, and he goes, "Greg," he says, "what do you want to do?" And I says, "I want to go find that son of a gun, and I want to shoot him in the face." And he said, "Get in the truck." I was angry, man. I was mad, because I almost had it whipped. And, long story short, so we get back. Of course, they had a medic there, one of their docs, and he was poking stuff in us and pushing pills in us, and he kept checking us. And we actually attacked the Ville because I wanted to clear that building to see if there was any evidence there, any dunnage, anything that we could confirm or deny. And there wasn't any. We actually got in a pretty good gunfight, and our truck got stuck in the mud. So
You're having a bad day right now.
I was like, "Okay, Lord, just a break here a little bit." And so we get out. Now we're engaging enemies off these buildings, and we had a 375 Ranger in the gun. They manned the guns in the gun trucks, and Jeremy Smith at the time, Private Smith, and he was engaging targets. I was engaging targets with my M4. I had a dude run out on the building in a black man dress on a cell phone. And I'm like, okay, he's up to no good. I said, "Hey, Sergeant Major, I got a target. He's on cell phone." He said, "Shoot him." I said, "Roger that."
Yeah.
So I put control pair in him. A couple other guys come out of a building. One was carrying an RPG, the other an AR or an AK. So I engaged those guys. And then it was just, everybody was shooting at the enemy at this time. And then the armored vehicle came around under fire. Guy jumps out with a snatch strap, hooks it to us, and pulls us out of the mud. And then we continue our assault on the Ville. And we spent the next 6 hours in a gunfight, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sure did. Pretty exciting day.
Greg, you talk about this really well in your book. By the way, I want people to see. Can you hold up Death Waits in the Dark so that everybody can see your book? You talk about this part really well in the book, but I wanted you to be on this episode because part of being unbeatable is getting back in the cockpit. Nobody wants to get shot down. A lot of people, after they get shot down, you know what? I'm going to go do a staff job. Don't want to ever get put in that situation again. But
They
you
do.
don't. You get back on your horse and you do it again and again and again. And very briefly, we don't have a lot of time left, but can you talk about the emotional and the physical challenges that you had to go through to get back in the cockpit again? But
You
then
bet.
after you do that, I want to talk for a minute about your spiritual strength, because that comes out again and again. Your deep faith comes out again and again in the book, Death Waits in the Dark.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I get back, and of course, I sat down with all of our surgeons, and we map out a plan. And they asked me, they says, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I said, I want you guys to fix me so I can get back in a fight, because my buddies depend on me, B Company depends on me. And they kind of looked at me like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah, this guy.
So, but I have had a total of 42 surgeries, and I have 47 pieces of titanium in my body with a few enemy frags and stuff.
We hit that way too fast. I want the listeners to hear this again. Listen to what it took for him to be able to get back in that aircraft and be FMQ. How many surgeries? How many pieces of metal in your body?
42 surgeries total. Yes. And then 47 pieces of titanium in me.
Anybody would have tapped out after the second or third surgery. The fact that you were willing to go to those lengths to get back in the aircraft is nothing short of unbeatable, brother.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Night Stalkers don't quit, brother.
That's right. They never quit.
Not
even after 47 pieces of metal in your body.
No, no. Yeah, so I told my commander, my command group that, "Hey, sir, I want to get back on the horse as soon as I can, as soon as Doc says I can." And he's like, "Roger that, God bless you." And I was grounded for a while, so I went and did a tour with the Delta guys, B Squadron, for their rotation as a fires guy and an air guy, because I had to get back in the fight, man. You're the same way. We're all the same way.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and then I worked with the 22nd SAS for a couple months while I was there. And yeah, it was just great operators, man. Yes.
For some of the listeners, they don't understand that mindset, and I just want to try to explain it for a second. It's not about violence. It's not about anger. It's not about revenge. It's because my buddies who I love are still in that fight. And if I can get healthy enough physically that I can get back in the fight, then I'm going to do it because of my buddies, not because of the enemy. But
No.
You talk about this part really well in the book, Death Waits in the Dark.
Good.
Talk about your faith and how much of a difference that made for you after getting shot down and going through all of those surgeries to get back on the horse, air quotes, to get back in the cockpit and to get back to the fight again.
Yes, sir. And I leaned on the Lord quite a bit, and I prayed about it. But I mean, the first thing I did when I crawled out of that helicopter, I just said a really, really, 5 or 6 word prayer. I said, "God, just give me speed and accuracy and watch over my kids if anything happens." That's it. I didn't ask him to survive or anything. Just help me do a good job. And yes, and with that faith, that gave me the strength, and it gave me the courage to continue on with what I felt that I needed to do. And it's like you said, and we've both been in very, very bad situations. And it's not about country or your flag or any of those things. It's about the guys on the left and the guys on the right, man.
It's always about your buddy. Yep.
It. And that's what drove me. And I love to fly. I love to fly that helicopter, and I love shooting bad guys in the face, man. I love my job. And so, yes, through my faith, and I talked to our chaplains and quite a bit, to help me, because it's a mental thing too that you have to get through. It was scary as heck climbing back in that cockpit.
I know that, you know that, but I don't think the average listener understands. When you get back in that cockpit and you start flying again, you're thinking, I could get shot down at any second, because now that one heat-seeking missile is around every bush, around every corner.
Yes.
It's in every rooftop and every alleyway. I know what that feels
Everybody's trying
like,
to
man.
shoot me down.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
takes an incredible amount of courage to get back on the horse, as we're calling it, to get back in the cockpit and back in the fight, man.
it does. It does. But we're all professionals, and we love what we do, and we love our units. We love our country. And that was driving me.
Yeah.
So when I did get back up to flying, and our flight docs had set up a schedule for me, so when I got back up to flying, got back up FMQ, went out and did 40 or 50 auto rotations one day. And they were like, "Are you good, bro?" And I says, "Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm having fun. Yes, let's go do this." So yeah, I did 5 more combat tours after that. So yeah, God is good. He's got a plan.
He's good all the time. Yep. Eventually you retire from the Army, but I want people to hear you're still being a good dude to those guys that are guys and gals that are serving. So tell everybody why you started Blades for Brothers and what Blades for Brothers is.
Sure. So I started knife making it was a little less than 2 years ago, and I have several friends that I was in the Army with, and then in the knife industry. They're knife makers, and they always told me, they're like, "Hey man, come, try this, try this, try this." So one day I've got a good friend of mine, lives about 20 miles away from me. He's a knife maker, former Marine, Jared Johnson, and just started making knives. So I go over there one day. He's got a coal forge. I put a railroad spike in this forge, and I hammer forge this thing into a knife. And I'm like, okay, now I know why you guys are doing this. It's therapy. All right. It
I was
engages
about
my
to say, there's a
it
lot of
engages
therapy
my
banging
brain.
that hammer on a hot piece of steel on the anvil. That can take a lot of aggression out right
Oh yeah.
there.
It's like banging steel with your pistol,
Mm-hmm.
or on it with a hammer and an anvil. And yeah, so I was hooked, man, and yeah, I dove into it. And I sought out the best knife makers in this country, because I tell everybody, I was like, okay, I got to learn this stuff. I'm 63 years old. I'm 20 years behind you guys, so I sought out
Got
the
some
best.
catching up to do.
Yes, and I did that in the knife industry. Man, these folks, they just embrace you. I mean, I called one guy, said, "I want to come work with you." I flew out to Florida, spent a week with him. Another guy in Oregon, and John Horrigan, he lives about
Uh-huh.
3 hours south of me, and yeah. So, and Bob Horrigan, he was a good friend of
Yeah.
mine. He was
Yeah.
killed in '05 out in Iraq, but an incredible knife maker, man, just like his twin brother John.
Yeah.
So I told my wife one day, I says, I'm getting so much back from this. I want to give back. I want to teach guys how to do it. I mean, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, brother, but I love doing it. So I started a nonprofit called Blades for Brothers. And we bring in vets and first responders. I've had a firefighter in here probably 4 or 5 times now,
All right.
up here in Graham, and teach them how to make a knife. And it's a safe place, man. It's a safe place where we can come, we can fellowship, we can learn a new trade or a hobby or whatever the case. And they make them a skinning knife or a fighter or whatever they want to do. And yeah, so we're going full blast right now. Check us out. We got a website, bladesforbrothers.com. And I made some knives. I call it war steel. So I made some knives. I had minigun barrels from my crash site that I carried around for years. And I said, hey, I want to make something cool out of these. So, and I had a piece of World Trade Center steel.
Yeah. The steel from the Twin Towers. Wow.
Yes. So I forged that steel. I got 4 blades out of it. This is one of them. This is the mini bob. So
That's a beautiful knife right there. Yep.
1600 layer Damascus. That's minigun barrels and World Trade Center steel. So we got a new shop that we're building. My wife Edie started that without me knowing. And I was like, what in the world is going on? She goes, you just don't worry. I got this.
That's right.
Okay. But yeah, guys have been coming in, helping when they can. But we'll get there one day. We're out of money right now.
Yeah.
So I got to make some knives, man. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want people to know about Blades for Brothers because this nonprofit that you're doing, you're not only making amazing knives, but you're also helping guys and gals work through some of the stuff that they've gone through in
Yes.
combat.
You
And
bet.
banging on an anvil can really help you if you got a guy next to you that's worked through some of the stuff you've worked through. So you're making a big difference, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are.
And together, and so here's what I want to do to end this episode with you, man. Together, you and I have been talking about trying to make a difference with one of your knives. So as of today, we're going to take some of that war steel, the minigun barrels from your gunship and the steel from the World Trade Centers, put it in a knife, and we're going to laser engrave in that knife to honor the crew chiefs from the 160th that gave their lives in Somalia. We're going to make a knife in honor of Staff Sergeant Tommy Fields.
Yes.
And then you and I have agreed that we're going to raffle this knife off and give 100% of whatever comes in off of this raffle to the Night Stalkers Foundation, who are making a difference, giving scholarships, helping out the aviators and their families from the 160th, the incredible warriors from the 160th. So as of tonight, you have the chance to sign up or to make a donation to receive this knife, and this raffle will end at the end of 2023. December 31st is when we'll select the winner. But together, man, I'm hoping that this knife brings in $25,000.
I think
every penny of that is going to go to the Night Stalkers Foundation.
There's no more of that steel on the planet. That's it, and there never will be.
Yeah.
So it's 1600 layer Damascus. And just a quick note too on the book, Jeff, that I prayed about this when I wrote it, and I didn't want to write it, but everybody says you're the guy. Okay, you're the guy.
You are. Yeah, you are.
So, and I was honored because we walk among giants every day when we were in our units. And why I was there, I worked hard every day. I was like, man, I'm going to get fired today, But for 15 years, you're as a ranger or as an operator, man, it's always the same. Every day is a check ride.
Yeah.
But I decided I'd donate 100% of the proceeds from the book.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes.
Check
To date,
that out.
we've donated $56,000.
Oh man, you are amazing, Greg.
Nonprofits. Yeah. I'll send a check. Guy will call me. He's like, Gravy, what's this $5,000 check for, man? I said, it's a donation, you knucklehead. It's from book sale.
Well, I was going to talk about it at the end of this episode, but I'll say it now and I'll mention it again. We're going to give away a copy of your book, and we're going to give it away to one of the listeners, but I'm going to give away a copy of your book just so that I can challenge everybody else to go out there and buy your book. And now you've just heard that Greg is going to give away the money that comes in from his book. That's the kind of guy who is still giving back after years of leaving, but still making a difference for warriors.
You bet.
Greg, man, I have the greatest respect for you as a warrior, as a man of faith, but also as a great dude. So thank you for being
you've
on this
always
episode.
been one of my
me,
heroes, brother.
Dude, that means the world to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for working with me on this raffle so that we can honor Tommy Fields. He deserves it, but also so we can raise some money for the Night Stalker Foundation. No other unit out there deserves it more than the 160th does.
I agree.
Thanks for being unbeatable. Thanks for being a friend, Greg, and thanks for being on this episode with me, brother.
Thanks, bro. Be blessed.
Yeah, you too. There is not enough that I could say about how impressive Greg is as a pilot, as a warrior, as a man of faith, and as a guy who is retired from the Army and continues to give back to warriors. From the book sales all the way to the Blades for Brothers Foundation that he's created. I really do want to challenge everybody to go out and check out his book, Death Waits in the Dark. I'm going to give one copy of that book away to somebody. All you have to do to get a copy of that book, to be registered to get a free ebook version, a Kindle version of Death Waits in the Dark is be part of the Unbeatable Army list. If you're not already part of the list, just go over to unbeatablearmy.com. It's totally free. You just sign up by putting your email information in, and somebody from the Unbeatable Army is going to get a copy of Greg's book. I want to say thank you for checking out this episode. If this is your first time hearing this podcast, why don't you go ahead and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen to this thing, or maybe subscribe if you want to watch Greg live, or watch Greg in person. Subscribe on YouTube. I also want to tell you about our followers on social media. We're pretty much everywhere on social media. Just go search for us at Unbeatable Podcast and you'll find our social media pages, but you'll also find amazing people there, like our fan of the week this week, John Thomas. John, thanks for being so engaged. Thanks for being so supportive. Thanks for being our amazing fan of the week this week. For the rest of you, thank you for tuning into this episode. If you want to become part of the raffle for this war steel knife that Greg has hand forged, all you got to do is go to my website, jeffstrucker.com, and click on the raffle link at the top of the page. We'll put links to my website, to Greg's book, and to Blades for Brothers. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you have been inspired by this incredible American warrior. See you next time.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.